Welcome to this episode, the latest episode of the Coach Turf podcast. And today we're talking to the one, the only Colin Reid. Hi, Colin.
Hi Daniel, how are you?
Yeah, smashing, absolutely fantastic. How's your day been?
Very busy. Been a great day. I've done a podcast earlier on. Got lots of things to do, but yeah, it's enjoyable. So looking forward to another episode of the podcast and
Yeah,
sharing hopefully a few bits of wisdom and a bit of knowledge that I've got.
and today we're going to be talking about the STEP principle. So now it's over to you, Colin.
The step principle. Where do you want me to start? Obviously, it's a we talk about S.T.E.P. step, hence the step principle, and we talk about how we can use it and utilize it to help our sessions be more sort of conducive to learning. So um, don't always quote me on these. I've done it automatically, but I think we talk about the shape and the size. That could be the S of your practice. So obviously there's benefits to having various shapes and various sizes to your practice. So for me, the basics really are if you're attacking and we talk about it being a small area, then it's obviously going to be harder to get success. Whereas if we was talking about out of possession and defending, the smaller the area is to defend, it's going to be easier. So whether we're working on in possession or out of possession, if we make the size bigger, it's going to make it easier or harder depending on what you're working with and vice versa. So again, if I want to defend and we can do it in a tight area, it's always advisable to start off and getting success, making it smaller to get the principles and then making it larger, which will make it more difficult, and vice versa. If we worked on attacking and we got success because we made the area bigger, to see if it's really working, we can decrease the size and make it smaller and therefore make it more of a challenge for our players. And that's all we're trying to do, challenge the players, but start off to make it easier and then make it more difficult to challenge the players and really make it more difficult. Any questions you want in terms of that? So like we can talk about the shape of a practice. So football's played on a rectangular pitch. There might be certain practices that I put on that I can make it a diamond, so I cut off those areas. I can use a circle if I want to work on certain things. So if I'm honest, I try and work on the pitch dimensions, i.e. squares and um, rectangular. So not to disorientate players, but like I say, if I want to work on a particular area about midfield players and little takeovers in the middle of the pitch, I might use a circle to replicate the markings on a football pitch, where I might have a midfield player running across, screening it, protecting it, a little takeover. And if I actually want to work on that area of the field of play, then I might use a circle. I can use all sorts of areas. I can use triangles, I can use diamonds, whatever I want to particularly work on. So I think that, we're not one size fits all. I mean, you may even have two shapes within that. So you might have a rectangular shape and you might put a diamond within that to sort of emphasize that, that space you don't really need to go into, or we're going to attack that space. So for me, the size and the shape is important in terms of helping your players develop.
What about how would you use? I mean, you mentioned the triangle and the diamond because I've been thinking about this. When would you use those ones in particular? What kind of topics, session topics, and practices? Where would you use that?
You got me there. But no, seriously, if I look at it, I'm very much so I use it for defending. So I'm very much my philosophy and I have reasons and rationale behind it is higher up the pitch. I like to show the play inside. I'm not worried if they're inverted and you've got a left-footed player playing on the right, and we're encouraging them to cut in. And I will sort of put some areas on a pitch that just highlights that we want to keep them out of that space. So if you imagine you had a rectangle pitch and it's really wide, and I suddenly brought it in, and I could do that by using a triangular shape or a diamond shape, I could say, look, if we're defending and we make the space where we want them to go inwards, then that shape I could incorporate by using that. And I could use it with shooting practices as well. So there's lots of practice, but that's just one example that springs to mind. I think when we talk about practice design with more detail, then I'll actually show clearer examples on a tactical board, on a tactic board, and then we'll mention the step process and we'll talk about, look, refer it back to, remember when we talked about the shape of the practice. So I think that's really important. Is that okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you. I just want to go back to also the other rest as in size, because especially I think it's like when coaches are starting out, they get like these kind of almost like these guidelines. They got these practices, and they say it's 20 by 30 or 30 by 15, for a lot of people, I think it's like okay, so they've got to make that area that size. But
Yeah.
then in reality, it might be a case of actually, no, that's not necessarily the case. So what would you say to this? Because for me, it seems like I've always, since finding out about the step principle and this part of the step principle, to me, it's always seemed very flexible and coach friendly.
Yeah,
What's
I
your
think, like you say, I think you've hit the nail on the head when you say about the size. So let's just say, for example, people look on the internet and they'll see this practice has got to be 30 by 15, as you said. So players will take that and they won't realise the practice might be Barcelona, Real Madrid, first team, adult senior players, experienced players, elite players. Well, I might have under eights. So think about, trying to get into a youngster's mind and go, I might need to make it smaller. So it's all relative. One size doesn't fit all. It's a guideline. And if you get success, then you might go, I'll make it bigger, for example, if it was defending, to make it more of a challenge, and vice versa. If you did it and you were successful, you might now go, let's make it smaller, like we said earlier. But age is important, ability is important, and it's important to remember that one size doesn't fit all. It might need tinkering and playing around with. If it looks right, see it, you get that vibe of this is not quite working. What can I do? And then it's about recognizing that and not being frightened. And when we say to people that we're assessing on courses, or we go, you happy with that size? Well, I didn't think it was, but why didn't you move it? So you can move it. It's your session. If it's not working, change it. If it's working and you get success easy, change it again. So that would be my advice to coaches. Look at the players you're working with, look at the ages, and look at the theme and the topic and the outcomes that you want from that.
Thank you. I think we've exhausted the S. What about the T? What's the T?
Oh, I'm going to have to go now. Yeah, time. That's a clue. So it could be the task or time. It's how long do you spend on it. So you can differentiate and say, is it time? Is it task? What is the task? What's the objective? You need to set clear objectives and aims, what you want. So when you talk about communication, you talk about your objectives to do that. How many times you see practices where you set out the objectives for one team and then the other team intercepts it, and it might be a rondo, it might be a 4v2 Magic Diamond practice. The other team win it, and the practice stops. So both teams need a task, they need an objective, they need an aim. So the task is important, what you set for both teams, and the time that you spend or afford on that is vital as well. You're not going to spend 45 minutes working on a very basic task. You might say, I'm going to give this 10 minutes of my time before we progress it to something else. So time and task, what's the objective? What am I trying to achieve? The outcomes, and how long am I going to, um, use up of my session in trying to get over these fundamentals.
I think another part of that is also what you said, but also like you can combine them. So like you're doing a practice, you got to do something you got a certain amount of time to do that task in. Yeah, right. So like you got like a 30 seconds to do this, or you got 20 seconds to do it or something. Yeah, it's fantastic. What about the E?
Yeah, the equipment. What equipment do I need? So if we're talking about planning and preparing, do I need balls, bibs, goals, little goals? Am I going to practice in the relative part of the pitch? Am I going to have a magic man? Do I need a different colour bib? I've got reds versus blues. Do I need to provide a different colour bib? And you'll be surprised how many people on the coaching badges set up a practice and we'll get all the same colour bibs, greens and blues, or you might have yellows and reds. And when I look, I always go to them, goalkeeper's got the same colour bib on as the players. And you'll see it in lots of practices that are done by people. And I go, how many times you play in a game on a Saturday or Sunday and you see the goalkeeper wearing the same shirt as the players? It doesn't happen. And I think from a coaching point of view, it helps you to evaluate and look out there and go, oh, I can't see who the goalkeeper is. Which one, they need to be differentiated between. And also, big advocator, and it was me, then we had something back in the days with Trevor Brooking, talked about bibs. And it's something now I've got a bit of a axe to grind with. We talk about relationships. Why don't bibs have numbers? So if I talk about, um, relationships between a right back and a right winger, left back, I might have a 2 and a 7, a 3 and 11. So it doesn't matter because different countries have different numbers and they wear a 66 and a 54 and people go, what difference does it make? I think as you move up the spectrum and as you get into the high level coaching badges and awards, there needs to be some replication of realism, which we talk about. And if we talk about relationships, it's important that those numbers correspond with that. And if you're a novice coach and you're trying to manage the other team and you've set up a team playing against another team and people drifting all about over the place and you know your numbers, you go, no, you wouldn't start in there, you would start there and you would start there. There's always times where there's going to be morphing and people change, but invariably that equipment and having numbered bibs is imperative to make it real. And some people I work with still don't see the rationale behind that. But for me, I think don't give your players any excuse to have an excuse. If you can give the detail and you can explain the time, the task, what you want them to do, and you're playing as a right back, you're going to play the number 2. You're going to play as the right wing, you're number 7. You're the holding midfield player. This is something we have in England. Are you the 4 as you used to be? Or you now gone to the European, the 6 is that holding midfield player, and the 4 and 5. So it doesn't matter about, as long as you know you're that player, you're that player. So numbers change, but that equipment and having cones, how many times you see you have the flat cones, you might zone your pitch off and you put the pancakes, as I call the pancakes, and there's not going to interfere with the ball and people can see it quite clearly, and having the right colours. So if you're colourblind, if you put I think it's a red and blue on a green, some people have trouble in seeing that. Use white on green because it's easy. And if you want to put a zone across the pitch, i.e. thirds, which I use a lot, or something down the line that you want to work on defending or switching play, and you've then got lines that run vertically as opposed to horizontally, then it's really important that you don't want the ball to be passed to someone and it's one of those little hat ones and it takes it off or someone treads on it. So for me, it's about having the right equipment, having a tactic board, having marker pens, marking out your practices is in the same way as the pitch runs. I see people will put things out, just little things that you learn, and have an understanding of the sun. It's the equipment that we can't control. But if I'm talking to a group of players and as an experienced coach, I will make sure I'm facing the sun because there's nothing worse in all the players are facing the sun and they're all squinting and they're looking and most people wouldn't even consider it. And you're thinking, why are they doing that? Particularly if I want to ask them where their position could be on a tactic board, which is an imperative part of equipment. So for me, that experience and that knowledge can be passed on, and that equipment side, bibs, goals, cones, um, is imperative to make it conducive to learning, and that's all we're trying to do.
You've added so much to that equipment. I was going to actually ask you about what are your, what would you say were the minimal essential parts of equipment, but I think you've mentioned, for example, the tactic board there. You probably say the footballs, the bibs, the cones. They're probably the bare minimum that you need. We could return to this topic around the equipment in another episode because it's something that you can actually build further. But to stay with the topic of the step principle, what about the P?
The players, the people that are in it. I could also mention something about safety as well with that equipment. It could be linked into the size and S under safety. And that's basically if you have groups of players working, and something that players or coaches need to be mindful is safety gaps between players working. So if you're working in groups, but they're close, as opposed to having one set of markers dividing them, we need to have a safety zone. So you might need two sets of markers. So if the players are on the extremities, they could be on the extremities of one line and bump into each other. Whereas if you leave that safety gap, and there's things that I work with coach educators, and I'm giving them that because they don't always get that information. I think they would have mentioned it, but they don't always, and we're seeing it. So it just covers yourself. So for me, they're all important things. But yeah, the people, you might have an overload. So you might want success. So you might have 10 players and you go, I'm not going to go 5v5, I'm going to go 7v3. And that's easy. So now we're going to make it smaller. Or what do we do? Do we go 6v4 to make it harder? Do we go 8v2? So those numbers can give you an underload or an overload, and the people are important. You might have a magic man playing on both sides. That has its advantages and it has its disadvantages because that player, and this could come into safety as well. You might have a player that's come back and we don't really want contact with them. So as one of those players, the physio saying we want him to play but no contact. So you make that player the magic person. So they can't be tackled by anybody. So they've got a distinguished coloured bib on. So they're working on their aerobic fist knits, moving around. They're working on the technical side, but you're working on their safety. So they'll have a different coloured bib. People know that they can't tackle them. They're on both sides, and that's something else. So those numbers are really important. You can have different coloured bibs for people who are on the side. You can have three sets of bibs for players. Again, we're talking about the equipment again, but the people need to be differentiated between because you could have the reds and the blues playing against the yellows. And then when transition occurs, it could be yellow and reds playing against the blues. So, in terms of the numbers of people, you need to identify the different groups because you don't always have two groups. You can have three groups, but you need to distinguish and differentiate between those groups. So that's basically the step principle with detail.
Yeah,
Last thing, sorry, that equipment again, shin pads. And I've just thought something else. We talk about safety, we talk about equipment. Players wear shin pads, shin guards, the things that they've got water as well. I think it's really important in different climates that you need to ensure that they've got those things. They might need to put on their suntan lotion, which you're not advised to do in England. Get the players to do it to themselves. So all those sorts of things are really, really important within the bigger picture. But having that detail to actually explain what them components of the step principle are is massively important. Again, and also you might have a whistle. Some people can whistle. I can't. I've got a loud enough voice for that standstill moment or freeze. So you might also say a watch is vitally important. A whistle may be important, particularly if you're working on the timing side of stopwatches, whatever. So some people work and it's 2 minutes of that, 2 minutes of that, or you're in for 30 seconds, you're in for 30 seconds. So all part and parcel of a coach's equipment.
what I've been getting from what you've been saying and what I've learned over the years from the step principle is very much as well how we can deal with the environment and to make it more challenging for some, maybe less challenging for others, and to just like enhance the situation, what we've got in front of us. I think I came across also something about someone writing an S at the end of step to make it steps. Actually, no, it's not. Now I know it's not. No, I've got it mixed up. Don't,
You're
no
not
worries.
getting it mixed up with a pop group from years
No,
ago,
no,
are you?
I've got it mixed up with decision making. That's another
Decision
one.
making.
Yeah,
Okay.
bots. That's it. Okay, no worries.
I was going to say decision making starting with an S. That might be in Polish, but not in English.
No, I was going
But
to say no because I was thinking, no, that's decision making. That's for another topic. Anyway, so yeah, so this has been very, very informative. Um, I've really enjoyed revisiting the step principle. For me, it just gives you so much as a coach, as I said, just so much flexibility. It's always been very positive for me. I don't know how it has been for you.
yeah, I think these are things I've forgotten over the years. Obviously, we educate coaches that come on courses about them. But if you said to me you could have a whole subject on it, because I haven't forgotten it, I incorporate it, it becomes natural. But you could put the fear of hell into someone if you said you've got to remember all these things, let them coach. But they're just ways of aiding and helping, assisting coaches to get the outcomes that they want and set the various challenges that they need to in order to get those outcomes. So for me, I think as you get older, you forget how much you've learned and how much you've learned and how much there is to pass on. But I go and watch some sessions, and it's like a car crash. And again, it's that old saying that by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And for me, the more knowledge you have, and the more reasons why you do it and why you utilize it. Some people scoff at it when we talk about the numbers on backs, and they come out with such silly things like we see players wear number 68 now or 52, and you're going, no, no, no. Whatever it is, if you've got those numbers and the little things about having the goalkeeper with a different colour bib to the players, you go and watch sessions, and like I say, I'm a stickler for detail, and there's lots of coaches out there that have no detail. They don't know the key factors or anything, and it's become a little bit like we just talk about the game, but we don't actually know the detail. So for me, the detail should always remain there, and coaches that care and educators that care have that detail. Where we're in that age and stage now where not everyone realises detail. It's just say la vie, what I mean? So it's a fair, it just doesn't matter. But yeah, for me, it's very important.
Thinking about this and listening to you, I also think about the realism, keeping everything like realistic to what the game is about. And that's for me, it's very clear as the people get older, when they go from the child and through the teenage years, then I can see that. Now, when you're coaching, for example, kids, I would just like to maybe end with this. I often think when I see like maybe sometimes they get younger age groups and they sometimes even play 6, 7v7, something like that. And there's a lot of the time you see the same players on the ball, and then you've got the same players that are not on the ball, and they might be just walking around the pitch or maybe even sitting down on the grass. Sometimes I think to myself, well, even keeping in mind with this step principle and with the equipment, because it's at that age group, I feel like there could be a freedom for just you don't have to always it doesn't have to always be that realistic. So maybe just throw another football on, so
Yeah.
then you can have so you can add
Well,
that extra
I
football.
think you've made a good point. You've reminded me of a couple of things. So it shows that I didn't do everything. We talk about equipment, we talk about multi-ball. So there's an opportunity to use various balls so people get more chance to practice. And we talk about conditions. They call it constraints now, but we might want to say within that whatever we're coaching, that some people will play with less touches. I think if you dictate and say we're all playing 2 touches, for example, it's unrealistic. And the reason is I always say, and it's something that was taught to me and I've taken it on board, is play with as few touches as you need. So I'd say the better players will play first time. If you recognise that you're not a better player or you can't deal with a pass, it's an important part of your learning that I might need another touch. Well, if you tell everyone's got to have 2 touches and someone can play 1 touch, you penalise them, because they might be able to deal with that pass. If you've got someone that needs a touch and then may need to get it out of their feet before they play the pass, if you tell them they've got to have 2 touches, then they're not going to be successful. So I think it's about recognising and understanding the differentiation within the group. And when you recognise this differentiation, we can set realistic challenges for all those people. And those challenges may not be the same. It's recognising where they're at. But sometimes we dictate and we go, it's got to be 2-touch, it's got to be that. And I even know of people that have taken international teams who have got young players saying and it is a condition, you either play with 1-touch or 4-touch. And if you put that in there, it can be unrealistic. It has its purposes, but then when you go and play an international game and you have a first touch and you're thinking, well, I've got to have another 2 touches because the coach has put that on you. And I do know that from clubs I've been at, talking about people that have worked with people that have taken international teams, imposing unrealistic things in a match, 1-touch or 4-touch. And if you've ever tried it, it's good to use in training, but you're doing it purely to get the players to think about, do I need to open my body up and play early? I need to recognise that the speed of the ball, the weight of the pass is good, that I can then pop it off. But to carry that into a game is a little bit ludicrous. And so everything has to reflect realism, and it's got to be relevant. And, we talk about realistic practices that are going to make better players and come to help them make better decisions, which are all part of football.
Colin, do you have any final thoughts on the STEP principle?
I just think it's an important part to have an understanding of why we might change the size, the numbers, because the outcomes that you can achieve are so different when you understand those principles and you can incorporate them into your training sessions, your coaching sessions. But once you have an understanding of why, it's not just done, I'm the coach, you've got to do this. It's got to be done for a purpose and a reason. And if you're doing it just to go, look at me, I've got lots of varieties and changing, well, no. Does it fit in? Is it conducive to learning? Does it help your players achieve and challenge them, more importantly? So for me, it's a massive important part of designing your practices, and ultimately we design practice that help. And you can have different conditions on players, so you're not only challenging the group, you're challenging the individual individually to benefit them. So those that are maybe not as advanced can have an extra touch. That those that need an extra touch not going to lose their confidence because they can't play first time or 2-touch. So a really important part of instilling confidence. And we talk about the environment, setting the environment that's conducive to learning, and the STEP principle is certainly part of that environment and setting that tone and making everybody feel comfortable to make the decisions they make.
Smashing, Colin. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. Food for thought, definitely. And so, yeah, that's going to be everything for this episode. So thank you, Colin.
Thank you. And again, wish all the learners and viewers a good evening. And hopefully they can take something out of tonight's podcast and utilise it and use it in their session.
Definitely. We look forward to coming back with more episodes of the Coach Turf podcast very soon. Take care. All the very best. And let's enjoy the footy. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. All the best. See you later. Bye.